Welcome to our weird world. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week, looking at two different stories. Not super related by any means. I think the one kind of common thread is that both of these dudes were pretty crazy, and then they went about their crazy in very different ways. The first story we're going to look at is the story of Charles Whitman, and I actually alluded to his story on last week's episode, so you can kind of see where that one's going to go. We're also going to look at the story of Randy Weaver, who kind of similar in terms of kind of philosophies, I guess, as the David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, but his story kind of gets overshadowed by the Branch Davidians and also Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. It happened in that kind of early 90s era, and it was, government distrust and all that, but we'll get into it. No need to kind of preview it that much now. That's all the teaser you're going to get. Let's get into story time. Charles Whitman was born on June 24th, 1941 in Lake Worth, Florida. As with most Florida families, Charles witnessed a lot of domestic violence growing up. His mother, however, she was a devout Roman Catholic, and she did not believe in divorce. She really took that seriously, took those vows very seriously, which is admirable in a way. But also, ladies, if you're getting beat up, you should probably leave. Jesus will understand. Jesus isn't, some psychopath who, when you die and you go up to heaven, he's not going to be whispering in Peter's ear and being like, hey, that's the hoe that divorced her husband. We can't let her in here. She's gross. No, that's not going to happen. Jesus is going to be very understanding. Jesus, first of all, he's going to be like, hey, great job turning the other cheek so the bruises can match. Hey, who knew Jesus was a domestic violence comedian? But I'm a terrible person for that. But no. So if you're getting beat, it's probably okay to get a divorce. I think. Look, I'm not God. I don't make the rules, but I'm just assuming that God and Jesus are not, taking hardline stances and docking points for people who get divorced over domestic violence issues. Anyway, Charles' father, who was the leader of the violence in the house, was a strict authoritarian and demanded just absolute perfection from his family. And then when they failed to live up to that standard, which was often, he would beat them because that's how that works. He was also an avid gun enthusiast, which is a great combination. And he eagerly taught Charles and his two brothers how to shoot and maintain their weapons, which respect, right? If you're going to be a crazy gun person, at least be full circle, full spectrum crazy, where it's teach them how to hunt and track and good target shooters, but also make sure that they meticulously and, high attention to detail, clean and maintain those guns, because you can't kill the Mexicans and the black people if your gun doesn't work. Am I right? Huh? Anyway, I don't know what that sound was. This episode, to be honest, when I see the next episode I'm going to record, I kind of just, draw conclusions oh yeah, this will just be pretty straightforward. And then those are the episodes that get real weird. So that's where we are with this one. Charles, back into the story now. He eventually got so good at shooting, that he could, quote, plug the eye out of a squirrel. That is an actual quote from an actual source. And that truthfully sounds like a very Florida thing to do. So aside from being exceptionally good at shooting things with pinpoint accuracy, Charles was a real mild-mannered kid, well-behaved, and he was also extremely brilliant. His parents had him tested at 6 years old, and he scored 139 on an IQ test. I don't know how you measure the IQ of a 6-year-old who has no idea what long division and multiplication in algebra is, all right? Like, no clue of how fractions work, for sure, right? I don't know how you measure an IQ of 139 at age 6, but whatever. By age 12, he was an Eagle Scout. He was a talented pianist, like he played piano. And he even was like running his own paper route, no supervision, just going and being super responsible. Probably because his dad threatened to beat him if he didn't do it, but that's beside the point. After graduating high school, Charles enrolled in the Marine Corps and was deployed to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Somehow he kept this entire enlistment a secret from his father, who then tried to get the deployment canceled when he found out about it, which is odd because, I would think his father would be like, yeah, my son's a patriot going down there to Guantanamo, getting them commies, whatever. I don't know. But again, father tried to cancel it. Didn't work though. And Charles spent the next 18 months earning all kinds of military sharpshooting awards. He eventually made his way to the University of Texas at Austin to study mechanical engineering on a Marine Corps scholarship. But shortly into his new college life, he was caught poaching a deer when a passing driver saw him and his 3 friends and reported it to authorities. By the time they got back to their dorm, they started gutting it. Police knocked on their door, caught him in the act, and fined them $100. Well, on August 17th, 1962, Charles married the only girl he ever dated, Kathleen Leisner, in her hometown of Needville, Texas, which actually coincided with Charles's parents' 22nd wedding anniversary. However, Charles's grades were not great. Like, he was really struggling in school. He wasn't really able to concentrate. And the Marine Corps, it got to the point where his grades were so bad that the Marine Corps pulled their scholarship and they ordered him back to active duty at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina to serve the final 5 years of his enlistment. Now, I grew up in Eastern North Carolina. I have seen reports that it is actually pronounced Camp Lejeune, but over my dead body, am I going to add an R into that word? No shot, dude. No, I'm going to double check that. I'm going to verify that right now because I don't think that's, yeah, Lejeune. Get out of here. Get out of here. No way. Right? Because that's that same bumble-footed accent that puts R's, that weird like Australian thing where they make R's, or they're like words that end in O end in R somehow. Like some Southern people do that. Because like I'm from Goldsboro. I've heard people call it Goldsboro. Like, no, there's no R in that. Fix your mouth. Anyway, that's my soapbox rant for today. Charles was distraught over losing his scholarship, but he tried his best to be a good person. Back at Camp Lejeune, on one occasion, he saved a fellow Marine after a car accident by single-handedly lifting this guy's overturned Jeep and allowing him to get out, just like super strength, superhero kind of stuff. But Charles also developed a gambling problem. He was eventually court-martialed and sentenced to 30 days of confinement and 90 days of hard labor because of it. After he was honorably discharged in December of 1964, he returned to the University of Texas at Austin and enrolled in their architectural engineering program, since I guess, the mechanical engineering didn't really work out. He worked several jobs to support his family, and he volunteered as a scout leader, but Charles had also started to basically just turn into his father, and the relationship with Kathleen, his wife, got violent, and there were 2 separate domestic violence incidents there. 2 years later, Charles's mother finally figured out that she could get a divorce, and she left her husband. And Charles helped his mother move out to Texas with him to start a new life. His father spent over $1,000 on long-distance phone calls between Florida and Texas, begging her to come back, but she continually refused. And I forgot, Because I grew up in the dying days of landlines. We even had like an old rotary phone. And I was a whiz on the rotary phone. I loved numbers that had to be like, that had like nines and zeros in it, because I could just whatever the noise was. I loved it. But I also remember that like long distance phone calls were extra money for some reason, because I don't know how it works. But yeah, I can't imagine spending $1,000 just calling Texas over and over again. Meanwhile, while all of this was going on, Charles had started abusing amphetamines and suffered from severe headaches, probably because, and so he was taking the amphetamines for the pain. And anyway, whatever. On July 31st, 1966, Charles sat down and began typing a letter. And this is what a portion of that letter said. I'll put some like fun music behind this too. I do not quite understand what it is that compels me to type this letter. I don't even know if that's how he talks. This is just what we're going with. Perhaps it is to leave some vague reason for the actions I have recently performed. I do not really understand myself these days. I'm supposed to be an average, reasonable, and intelligent young man. However, lately, for I cannot recall when it started, I have been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts. And so he ends the note by saying that he wanted to help his wife and his mother get away from the suffering in the world and save them from the embarrassment of his actions. And like, obviously he's talking about his own violence in the discord, but he's also talking about what he's about to do next. So that night this is not probably how you do it, but that night he drove to his mother's apartment and stabbed her to death. And then once she was dead, he returned home and stabbed his wife right in the chest. The next morning, he drove to the UT Austin campus and told the security guard that he was there to deliver some equipment. He then climbed up to the 28th floor of the UT tower, killing 3 people along the way, just like random people in the tower. And then when he reached the top, he pulled out his hunting rifle, posted up, and just started sniping people. And like, remember, this dude is an excellent marksman, like top tier target shooter. So this is easy for him. And he's, albeit no way out at this point, limited number of bullets. So he's on a death mission, but he's just picking people off from the top of this tower. At first, people thought that the sound of gunshots was just construction noise or an anti-war protest. But 4 minutes in, after 4 minutes of just pow, click, click, pow, click, all of that, a history professor finally called the Austin police, and patrolman Billy Speed was the first to respond. And then he was just promptly shot, just like right out of the car. Hey, look, there's a sniper. Blam, just dead immediately. By noon, off-duty police officer Ray Martinez saw news of the shooting on television and called the department to see if they needed him to come in and help. Although he was told to go and direct traffic, he found 4 other officers already doing it when he got there. So he decided that he should just head up to the tower and try to take Whitman down. When he reached the 27th floor, he found Alan Crum, the university bookstore manager, Dub Cowan, a public safety agent, and Jerry Day, a fellow police officer who had kind of teamed up to try to figure out what they should do next, because they know he's on the next floor up. But is it booby trapped? Is it rigged? Is he just going to turn around and shoot them as they come out the door? Probably. So while officers and civilians returned fire, because Texas, to the top of the tower, Martinez and the other men, including Houston McCoy, which is another officer who had joined the group after making his way to the tower through an underground maintenance tunnel, they carefully worked their way up the stairs to the final floor. A police sharpshooter in an airplane actually tried to take Charles out, but he was nearly shot down when Charles returned fire and hit the plane. But eventually Martinez, he leads the group up to the top. And then 2 hours after the shooting had begun, Martinez and McCoy rounded the corner and came face to face with Charles. Martinez fired the first shot, but he missed. However, McCoy fired kind of at the same time and hit Charles twice in the abdomen with his shotgun and killed him. Martinez then took McCoy's gun, walked over to Charles's body, and just fired another shot at point blank range, which is, I don't know, maybe overkill. Who knows? Who cares? In all, 16 people were killed and 31 more were injured, and still like one of the biggest school shootings in history. So our next story is of Randy Weaver, who was born on January 3rd, 1948 to a very religious family, farming family in Villisca, Iowa. Now, if that name sounds familiar, that is because that is the same Villisca, Iowa as where the Villisca axe murders took place back in 1912. Never would have guessed that Villisca, Iowa would have made a return to this show. I completely forgot about that connection. But Randy Weaver, his family was so religious that they had trouble finding a denomination that perfectly matched their beliefs, which is pretty hard to do considering there are over 30,000 denominations and branches of Christianity. Like, you should be able to find something that fits whatever you think is right. But the Weavers were like so far to the right, just super conservative, super specific about what they thought about God, that like nothing in Iowa could make them feel comfortable, which is insane to me. But after high school, Randy decided to attend community college, but then quickly dropped out and opted instead to join the Army. He was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina and assigned to a special forces unit. And after 3 years, he received his honorable discharge. 1 month after he got out of the Army, he married Vicki Jordison in a multi-denominational ceremony presided over by both Mormon and Congregationalist pastors. He then enrolled at the University of Northern Iowa with hopes of becoming an FBI agent, which is, that's admirable. However, the tuition there proved to be too expensive, and so he dropped out and got a job at the local John Deere factory, which, outside of like going and working at the corn plant, like that's like the most Iowa thing you can do. Randy and Vicky, like whatever kind of weird Christian soup they had created with their denominations, they maintained their strict religious beliefs. And Vicky actually came to believe that the end of the world was coming very soon because civilization had just become too corrupt. And this is, 60s and 70s, free love, marijuana's cool, just doing whatever, man, psychedelics and the Beatles and all that kind of stuff. And so like, if you're a deeply religious person, I can see how that would bother you, right? Especially coming off of World War II. Like, I can understand how everybody thought the end of the world was coming soon. So in order to protect the family, Randy moved Vicky and their 3 children to a remote cabin in Ruby Ridge, Idaho. And once they settled into the area, the Weavers continued their quest to find the right church for them and eventually settled on the Aryan Nations Church. And like, I don't know, man. At what point do you look inward? Like Weaver was born 1948, so he was born kind of after the end of World War II, but like that was still fresh for everybody. So they knew that it was, the world against this dude who wanted to kill all the Jews. And then Randy Weaver was like, maybe he wasn't such a bad guy. So he goes to Idaho, and especially like northern Idaho, where this is where those kind of people end up. Like, you think the South is a racist place. There are some sections of like northern Idaho where it's super remote, Montana, where you like even white people feel uncomfortable up there, and it's just all white, right? And so I hold to this theory that like the worst people live in the prettiest places. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting thing. But just in case you guys weren't aware, the Aryan Nation is an anti-Semitic, neo-Nazi, white supremacist group who wholly believes there's nothing wrong with the things that they believe. They formed as a subgroup of the Christian identity movement, which believes that white people specifically Germanic, Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, and Nordic people, are the direct descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is impressive considering those people were almost certainly of Middle Eastern descent. It's also funny because I can't remember the name of the actual group, but it's a group of black people. I think it might be the Black Hebrew movement, and they claim that they are the true descendants of like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they're the true Jewish people. It's insane. But it's also funny, like these neo-Nazis, they're claiming that they're the true, like kind of Jewish people, the true chosen ones of God, and that the actual Jews, the real Jews, are a bunch of imposters who have come in and taken over. Why that's important, I don't know, but who knows? To make it even better, the Aryan nations are also big fans of eugenics and fascism and just denying that the Holocaust actually existed. One day, while hanging out with his new Aryan Nations friends, Randy was approached by an undercover ATF informant named Kenneth Faderly at a rally where they started discussing weapons and how the government was definitely going to take everybody's guns one day. They've been ringing that bell for 40 years, and we just have more guns. Well, yeah, because we got to keep getting guns before the government comes to take them. Sure, whatever. The ATF was in the process actually of investigating two other men who were suspected of trying to start their own racist groups in Montana. However, Randy, his alarm bells went up immediately, and he refused to cooperate with Faderly. And so the ATF just ended up calling off the entire investigation. However, Weaver did end up eventually supplying Faderly with 2 modified shotguns, which is 100% illegal. Faderly eventually did get exposed and had to like run to safety. But the ATF ended up approaching Weaver and told him of all of the evidence they had against him for distributing illegal weapons. But they offered to drop the charges if he became an informant for them and an undercover agent, which seems like a great path for him because remember, he initially wanted to go to college to become an FBI agent. This is his chance. This is his crossroads. And instead, he refused, and so the ATF arrested him. And then when he didn't show up for his court date, the U.S. Marshals were sent to his cabin in March of 1991 to serve the bench warrant. However, Randy, he refused to cooperate because at this point, he had come to believe that the government was conspiring against him and that he was not going to receive a fair trial. Marshals made several attempts to allow Randy to surrender peacefully, but he just ignored all of them and just continued to just hang out in his cabin, and he refused to leave. On August 21st, 1992, nearly 18 months after the government had first tried to arrest Randy, a group of marshals arrived on the property to conduct a survey of the land as part of just a routine 3-month cycle. Like, it has nothing to do with the standoff. Randy's dog saw the marshals walking around on the property and started barking. And so they think that like they're moving in to attack and raid the property. So Randy's 14-year-old son, Sammy, and another family friend grabbed their guns and went out to investigate. And now both sides disagree on who shot first. But Sammy, one of Randy's dogs, and one of the marshals all ended up dead in the ensuing gun battle. And then the next day, the ATF responded by deploying snipers along the ridge that overlooked the cabin. And as Randy kind of went out the next day to view his son's body, which had already been placed in the shed, one of the snipers on the ridge had him in his sights and started to take aim. But then just as the sniper pulled the trigger, Randy kind of shifted to the side unexpectedly, and the bullet went through his shoulder as opposed to right through his spine, which would have killed him. So once the gunshot goes off, Randy runs back into the house. The sniper quickly reloads, fires another shot, but this time full headshot to Vicky, and she's dead. All right. So now all chaos. All right. For the next 10 days, as many as 400 federal agents surrounded Randy's house as negotiations continued. And like, I don't know how you negotiate at that point. It's like, hey, Randy, we know we've killed your wife and your son, but maybe you should surrender now. I don't know, because who you got left at this point, bud, right? Eventually, radio broadcaster Paul Harvey got in touch with Weaver and told him that he would pay for the best defense attorney in the country if Randy would just cooperate with authorities. And so at that point, Randy decided to finally surrender. He was formally charged with several various weapons offenses, but was actually ended up acquitted of everything except for the original failure to appear that they had gone out there to serve the warrant for in the first place. So, Paul Harvey really did get him the best defense attorney. Randy was also fined $10,000 and sentenced to 18 months in prison. And then after applying a time served credit, Randy only spent 3 months in prison for this. Additionally, in 1995, the U.S. government awarded Randy $100,000 and the 3 surviving Weaver children $1 million each over the deaths of Sammy and their mother. And since then, Randy's still out there. He's made several appearances in support of other anti-government protesters, but otherwise, he's still just isolated out in Ruby Ridge. And that's fine. If you don't, if you want to be antisocial and go out and be as far away from people as you can, great. But also, I don't know, don't be a racist and don't stockpile weapons and don't, ignore the government. I feel like that last statement might have irked some people. Just listen to the government. They're the ones in charge. It's pretty simple. You don't have to trust them. You kind of have to obey them. Fine. But you also have the ability to protest. It's fine. But I don't know, man. When the government shows up at your door with a lot of armed agents, I don't know, maybe just see what they have to say. And just kind of go along with it. That's where Randy Weaver, I think, went wrong. He just refused to cooperate. And yes, the government absolutely 100% overstepped its bounds. The sniper should not have shot. The other incident where Sammy Weaver died should not have happened. 100%. But also, don't be a racist piece of crap and just refuse to cooperate, right? So this is one of those frustrating stories where neither side is the good guy in this. We're so conditioned to want stories of good versus bad, black and white and all that. This story, that Randy Weaver story is not it. It's 2 bad guys fighting each other and you want both sides to lose. And then neither side really lost. Randy Weaver lost his wife and one of his kids. Very tragic. The government lost a ton of credibility and reputation, which continued to go downhill when the Branch Davidian siege happened. And so at the same time, the government didn't win in this situation because they didn't charge him and put him in prison for life or whatever. Randy Weaver didn't win because he still had to pay a $10,000 fine, even though he ended up getting awarded $100,000. So he still netted, $90,000, still spent 3 months in prison, has to live with this event for the rest of his life. I don't know. It's a real, just annoying and frustrating situation. But other than that, let's see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number 1, ladies, if your man or, your lesbian partner, whatever, we're not judging here. If they beat you, you can get a divorce and you can leave. God's not going to be mad at you. All right. Number 2, the Texas, I don't know, I forget what they called it, but the massacre at that UT Austin, one of the most prolific school disasters in American history, especially up until 1999 when Columbine and then Virginia Tech and Newtown and Uvalde have happened. So this one, the Charles Whitman story has kind of faded into history because of all of the recent school shootings. But yeah, still a pretty big event in history. And then last, number 3, Randy Weaver tried to play the government, and government wasn't having it. And so, his story, again, kind of like Whitman, his story gets overshadowed by, other non-trusting civilians of the government, David Koresh and Timothy McVeigh. But like I said, just a real frustrating story. Next week on Our Weird World, I know we normally save these sorts of things for spooky season in October, but it's my show. I can do whatever I want. We are going to have another episode about aliens, just some encounters and abductions. 3 stories next week. Going to look at the stories from George Adamski, Gordon Cooper, and Robert Taylor. Because, look, I got a ton of these, dude. Like, so many dumb alien stories. So it's fun. We'll look into it, and they're just fun stories. So thank you all for listening. Keep continuing to tell all of your friends, and keep it weird. I wake up and get me a gas station biscuit, head to town, wash it down with some Mountain Dew. I end every day about the same way, clock out and go fish just to crack a few. Chicken in a bread pan, picking out gulls and cull with some 10-pound tail. It might be hillbilly to a lot of folks, but Lord knows I couldn't care less. A pond water pool, a spinner on a spool, a styrofoam full of tobacco spit. I got a small town crew. We make our own rules. I do what I do 'cause my daddy did. You can say the world's flat. You can say we never made it to the moon. You can say we all come from a bunch of monkeys, but you can't say I ain't country. No, you can say I'm a redneck. You can say you don't like my truck. You can say that I talk and I dress all funny, but you can't say I ain't country. You can say I drink too many long necks. You can say my edges are a little too rough. You can call me a sinner 'cause I cuss on Sunday, but you can't say I ain't country. You can say what I'm smoking on is kind of funky, but you can't say I ain't country.